Welcome back to another week of refinishing. This week I wanted to tackle a project that was maybe a little bit easier. I've done a couple pretty time-consuming pieces over the last couple of weeks, and as well as behind the scenes that I have not filmed. This piece has been sitting in my inventory for several months, and I wanted to get it out of my inventory, pull it to the front, and work on it. I've done a couple other pieces in this set. This is the last piece that was in the set. I did initially have a set of nightstands and a longer dresser. So all that I have left is this tall chest of drawers. It does have some wear and tear. You can see it originally had a different set of hardware and somebody had replaced it over time, but you can see those ghost hardware impressions on the drawer fronts. I will be removing this hardware. I'm not going to be using it again for this piece. I'll probably save it. I'll either keep it for another project or I might donate it. It's decent hardware. It just doesn't really match the style that I'm going for. I think I would like to leave some of this wood grain, but we'll have to see how much I can actually leave wood grain. My very loose plan is to strip or sand down these side details as well as the legs and possibly this top half. There is a drawer in this top portion. It kind of hides in. It's more of a concealed drawer. So if I were to leave this top portion wood grain, it would stick out a little bit more. But follow along on this video and let's see what we can accomplish with this nice tall dresser. Probably the most significant damage on this piece is actually on one of these side fluted details that I actually really want to try to keep wood grain. Obviously somebody at some point had hit something really hard into the side of this and it dented it in. I'm going to see what I can do, but I am going to have to fill that in with a filler and try to reshape these fluted details in that section. Now, if I do decide to do that, I am going to have to color match that filler because I'm going to have to use a pretty durable filler like Bondo or something. Just a regular natural colored wood grain filler is not going to be strong enough to repair damage to this extent. Since I have brought these other pieces from this set down to raw wood in the past, I do know that it does strip pretty well and the wood grain underneath is pretty good. But I think I do want to paint the drawer fronts. That way I can completely swap out the hardware, fill in the old hardware holes, and replace it with something else. I don't have any new hardware in mind right now. I'll search around online and see what I can find. But I think I can modernize this piece a little bit and make it desirable again. The stain color that it currently is right now is definitely not on trend, and this isn't a vintage piece. But it is a well-made piece. It still has dovetailed drawers. It still has a lot of solid wood elements. It's a nice piece of furniture. Step number 1 is going to be to remove all of the drawers and start to disassemble this piece. Like many dressers, I found some treasures and just threw those in the trash. All of these drawers are rather large and in great shape. I didn't have any repairs to the drawers that needed to be done. It will be easier if I unscrew these legs in order to strip them and clean them properly. Like I said before, this hardware is coming out, so I will take it off, set it to the side so that I can clean these drawer faces a little easier. When I'm cleaning pieces like this, I do like to use either a heavy-duty degreaser or a TSP alternative. In this situation, it is a TSP alternative. I'll just use a bucket of warm, clean water and a rag to wash all the surfaces that I plan on working on. If a piece is especially dirty, I will do this 2 or 3 times. It really depends on the piece. If there's a lot of furniture polish, a lot of dirt, grime, it really is important to have a very clean piece of furniture before you start sanding or painting. There was a little piece of the solid wood trim that had just chipped and broken off. I'm just taking a little bit of CA glue and a activator spray to glue that back down. My next task is to mix up some filler. I am going to use Bondo today. This is a 2-part filler. You use part A and then part B, which is the hardener. Mix it very, very thoroughly and work really quickly with this stuff. So work in small batches if you need to. I'm going to use this to fill in that dent that I showed earlier. This is not a precise process at this point. I'm just trying to get the material on in the rough shape that I need it to be. I know the surface is curved. There are those fluted details. I will at the very least take the edge of my scraper and really sharpen those lines out, because that would be a difficult thing to tackle once it is dry. With the remainder of that filler, I am going to go ahead and fill in the hardware holes. I will do this at least twice so that I make sure those old holes are fully filled in. While I'm waiting for that first coat of Bondo to set up and really cure nice and hard before I go ahead and sand it and see if it needs another coat, I am going to start stripping the legs. Now, I've been noticing a lot of other refinishers are using acetone to strip some of the finish off of furniture. And I think this is going to be a perfect piece to try this on. Since it is a newer piece of furniture, I do know that it's not like a shellac base. I'm going to just take my pure acetone with some gloves to protect my hands and some steel wool, fine steel wool, and I'm going to try to buff the finish off and see if it comes off nicely with this acetone. If I need to use a soft bristled metal brush to get in some of the grooves, I will. Just going to see how it goes. And as you can see, I'm happy to say this acetone worked wonders on this finish. This is the exact reason why when you accidentally spill nail polish remover on a more modern piece of furniture, it pretty much ruins the finish. It just eats right through that. It's really breaking it down very, very nicely. In some of those tighter grooves, I do find that steel wool to really help to curve around and get in those tight spaces. But for the tightest of spaces, I am taking that wire brush and it just cleans up the rest of it. Now, I know that there is still going to be a very slight coat of that old finish stuck to that wood grain. And because of this, I am still going to have to sand all the areas that I want to remain wood grain. But by doing this step first, it really does shorten that sanding process and helps to prevent any mistakes when sanding over veneer, which the top of this dresser does have. I did find this acetone to be quite a bit quicker than if I were to use a chemical stripper. It's really turned out to be kind of a one-step process. Whenever I use a chemical stripper, I have to put the thick stripper on, let it do its thing for 10-15 minutes, scrape it off, and then go back in with an afterwash. Whereas this acetone really allowed me to skip that second step. Plus, it was a lot cleaner. Now, you definitely still want to use your protective gear when using this stuff. It's still pretty stinky and you definitely don't want to use your bare hands with it. With that being said, you also don't want to do this on a surface that you care about. So I definitely would not do this inside on any sort of floors or anything like that. Out in my shop, it's not a big deal. They're all concrete floors and they're already messy anyway. But keep that in mind if you do this process. I found it really helpful to loosen up all of that old finish with that steel wool using plenty of product and then going back in afterwards with a paper towel and wiping that old finish off. Because if I were to let that sit and dry that way, that finish would reharden and recure, and I would have another mess. But as you can see, it really wiped away pretty clean. I was pretty happy with this whole outcome and kind of wish that I had known this trick when I was doing the nightstands and the other matching dresser with this set, because it would have come off just as easily with those pieces. All the time that it took to strip that finish off gave my Bondo plenty of time to cure, so now it's ready to be sanded. I'm going to take a 120 grit sandpaper and I'm going to go over all of the areas that I filled, as well as the rest of the body of the dresser, everywhere that I plan on painting. I want to knock that finish down a little bit so that my primer has something to really grip onto and have really good adhesion. While I was stripping with that acetone, because it's such a runny product, it was dripping down on some of the other areas of the finish that I was planning on painting. So I really want to make sure to smooth those out so that there aren't any visible drips or runs underneath the paint. I will take my detail sander also and really start to get the details in on that area that I did patch. I will round it over so that it matches the same profile of the existing fluted detail, and then I'll go in and hand sand and really refine that. I want to focus on the grooves and the details and make sure that the fluting doesn't get lost with that area that I did fill. And with my detail sander, I am going to go around and sand the rest of the areas that I plan on leaving wood grain. I'm able to use a foam abrasive on this sander, and that really allows me to get around the curves of that front detail without losing any integrity of those curves. And back to hand sanding. I need to get up the rest of the finish that settled into the grooves of these front areas, and hand sanding is really the only way to do this. Now I'm ready for the paint wash. I did choose a medium toned brown color called Mud Puddle, and I have this watered down a lot. It's about 20% paint, 80% water, and I will do a light mist coat of water over the surface before I go ahead and paint this paint wash onto the area that I want to leave wood grain. I'm going to paint plenty of product on this surface and go all in one direction, the same direction as the wood grain, and wipe it back immediately. It's a lot easier to do more watered down coats and just add more layers if you need to, rather than doing it too thick or letting it dry out too much and having to sand the surface back. I'll also do this on the legs. Because it's such a watery consistency, it really does get in those grooves very well and settles nicely. I'm just going to make sure when I'm wiping it, everything goes in the same direction so that all of the stain looks nice and cohesive in the end. Once that paint wash is dried, I can go ahead and seal it up. I am going to be using a polyurethane today, a satin sheen. I will be spraying it, so I'm going to filter it into my spray gun. And I will do about 3 light coats in total. I'm going to spray it on in an even fashion and make sure I'm overlapping each pass of my spray gun by at least 50% to get nice, good coverage. Once that first coat is on, I'm going to go back and address that area that I filled in the front and take a color correcting paint specifically for this and just do layers upon layers upon layers of a color that matches and really blend that out. I like to do this before applying the second coat, that way that second coat seals it in. It's important to do a very, very light sanding with a high grit sandpaper in between the coats just to make sure it's a nice, buttery, smooth finish before spraying on the subsequent coats. I want to make sure and tape off all of those areas that I so meticulously just paint washed. One of my favorite go-to tapes is frog tape. It's a really good painter's tape that leaves really crisp lines. Whenever you're switching from one painted surface to another, I'll apply it and really press those lines and grooves down so that they're nice and tight and cover everything that I do not want paint to get on. I'm also going to plastic off the top. This plastic is pretty user friendly. It has tape on one side, the rest is plastic, and you can just tape it all down. It's really, really great for covering large surfaces. One of the tricks that not a lot of people know is that if you're using frog tape or maybe even other painter's tapes, it really helps to take a damp towel and run it along the seam of where you're transitioning from the painted surface to another surface. To prime, I'm going to be using a bin shellac primer. It's tinted white. I'm going to be putting it through my sprayer. Just make sure to read the cleanup instructions if you do decide to do this. And with everything all loaded up, I can go ahead and prime the entire surface that I want painted. This piece wasn't much of a bleeder, so I only did 1 coat of primer, and this was completely sufficient. One of the many perks of this primer is that it dries really, really quickly. So after not a whole lot of time, once it's cured, I can go in with a high grit sandpaper and just smooth over all of the surfaces. I'm looking to knock down any raised grain, any little dust bunnies that might have landed in the surface of the primer, and really prep it for that paint color. Today, I'm going to be using this really dark, rich green color. Unfortunately, I don't have a name for you. This was a custom color that I had mixed up, but it's a beautiful color and it's in my go-to Benjamin Moore Command formula. It sprays wonderfully through my sprayer. I will spray all the surfaces in a nice even coat, and once that coat has dried, just like the primer, I will go in with a high grit sandpaper and really just smooth all of the surfaces down, making sure to really get that buttery smooth finish in the end. And then I will finish everything all up with a second coat. And now for one of my most favorite moments of a project like this, and that's unwrapping that wood grain. It's a little nerve-wracking because you're second guessing yourself whether you taped everything off properly, but in this case I did. I do like to remove that tape before everything has fully cured and dried. This just allows me to get a nice crisp line, as well as wipe away any areas where paint might have seeped under a little bit more easily. I'll screw those legs back in and begin the process of putting everything back together. All the drawers are going to get a really thorough cleaning. There's a lot of overspray dust, sanding dust. That's why I like to wait and clean the inside of the drawer boxes until the very end, because I'm just going to have to clean them in the end anyway. I did pick up some knobs, and they're in a really pretty, I'd say, light brass color. I think they'll complement this green color really well. I'm going to go ahead and center them onto the drawers just in the position that I want and make sure they're all equal distance all the way down. And with everything all wrapping up, let's remind ourselves of what this piece looked like when I initially got it. Like I've mentioned before, this was the last piece in the collection that I refinished, so I knew how much potential it had. It's a really nice, well-built set of furniture. It was very orange, pretty scuffed. The hardware was not matching whatsoever. But look at it now. I think this will be a really pretty grounding piece of furniture in any room. It doesn't just need to be in a bedroom, it could be in many different spaces. I like that light wood tone as a contrast to that dark moody green. I think they play off of each other really, really well. I really like that nice pretty sheen on the wood grain pieces as well as the painted areas. I think this is a classy piece of furniture and it has so much more life left. Let me know what you think down below. Do you like this piece? Do you like the color? Would you have gone a different color? If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.